Yoram Schweitzer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let's speak a little bit about this not new, but a new behavior of the terror phenomena in the Middle East. And I refer to the way that Hezbollah, Hamas, and other organizations are behaving in the last few months vis-a-vis what's going on in Israel.
I think we should separate between them. They are trying to present it as a very cohesive axis, but it's not a cohesive axis. I think Hezbollah, which is more important than the others, is encouraged by what's going on in Israel, in addition to what Nasrallah himself, in his own mind, a little bit misguided mind, sees Israel as a spider web. I think he's encouraged by what's going on in Israel. I'm not sure that he knows exactly how the Israeli spirit behaves when there is a war, but when he looks at the situation now, he's emboldened, and it is apparent in his behavior.
But still, we see him taking risks that he didn't take in the past. We saw a terror attempt in Megiddo. We are seeing, all these border incidents, which might take both sides into some kind of escalation. And at the end, you know how it escalates. You don't know how it ends.
Yes. Look, again, there are two schools in Israel. One that looks at Nasrallah as a defensive, worrying persona that is looking at Israel as the aggressor, as the one side who has all kind of schemes against Lebanon, and he's the defender of Lebanon. He's like the IDF of Lebanon. And they interpret its position as a defensive with a minor nuances that he's taking in order to take advantage of the situation, but his intentions are also defensive. The others look at Nasrallah as an aggressor who is encouraged by the situation, that looks for escalation, not only because he wants to evade the problem that he has at home, but because he wants to provoke the IDF and maybe get into some kind of skirmishes, regardless that he doesn't want a total war. So between these two schools you have to maneuver and to, on one hand, not to be tempted to overreact in order not to escalate, but on the other hand, the other school says, let him do it. We are not going to go for a war over a tent. We are not going to be tempted to escalate when we have problems at home, and we still are the more powerful force, and we should not ignore his provocations, but take it with a grain of salt and do whatever we need to do in future, not now. There is no haste.
Is there a chance that Israel is misreading Nasrallah after studying and working with him for so many decades?
Again, I think it's not a misreading of Nasrallah. I think there are two schools of thought of his behavior. And I think that sometimes we can be mistaken and taking his steps too hastily as something which is provoking a superpower, a local superpower, with minor incidents. We shouldn't underestimate the attack in Megiddo, like in many times, like in life, since it was not as harmful as it could have been. We can restrain ourselves for a certain period, and we should be very prudent how we react. We can be more smart or smarter and do some sophisticated operation instead of high-profile sophistication, which can lead to escalation, as we know.
One thing that is new to Nasrallah is the behavior of Hamas in Lebanon. Nasrallah always claims that he's the guardian of Lebanon, he's, as you said, the IDF of Lebanon. Currently, he lets Hamas play in his own playground. We see it in the refugee camps. We saw it in a few attempts to attack Israel in the past few months, which might get Hezbollah itself or Lebanon into trouble.
Since Nasrallah is provoking Israel, the fact that Hamas launched some rockets, it's not for him, it's not something which is too exaggerated. And if he needs to calm or to restrain Hamas, he can. I think we should, later on, we can talk about the Hamas position. But for Nasrallah, since he's anyhow making small provocations, not grand provocations, besides Megiddo, which again, we can address it differently, I think for him, the launching of rockets by Hamas from Lebanon is part and parcel of his more audacious behavior towards Israel.
Is he coordinated with them?
Again, we are always dependent on the intelligence emanating from the IDF's intelligence. They say that the rockets that were launched by Hamas were not known to Nasrallah before.
In Passover, in March.
In Passover, yes, that's the facts. We know also that Hamas, representatives of Hamas, representatives of the PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the head of the Revolutionary Guards were in Lebanon at the same time. So we can assume that there was strategic basic coordination. Maybe on the tactical level there was a miscoordination by locals who were doing it. To sum it all, I think when Hezbollah, and if Hezbollah wants to control Hamas, he can convey the message to Hamas, not to provoke Israel when it's not convenient to.
So one last
Nasrallah.
question, Yoram, regarding that. I give my enemy high credit because that's a way to look at it. And Hezbollah is a serious organization,
Right.
and I bet Nasrallah studied some history. The Palestinians got Lebanon into trouble in the 70s and were kicked out in 82. Hezbollah stepped in a way at that time and minimized the Lebanese army. Isn't there a danger that Hamas will take some part or some force from Hezbollah and get it into danger?
No, I don't think so. First of all, I share your views of our enemy as serious people. They can be mistaken, but they are serious. I don't think that Hamas or any other Palestinian organization in Lebanon can provoke now and overcome Hezbollah's dominance in Lebanon. So I don't think that Nasrallah is afraid that if he lets the Hamas get loose, he will suffer the consequences by changing the dominance of Hezbollah.
So let's speak of Hamas. What does Hamas want by, starting a new front, not only fighting from Gaza and trying to ignite the West Bank, but opening that front in Lebanon?
Hamas is seizing the opportunity of its being a part, not integral part of this Shiite Mukawama axis, the Shiite resistance axis, and the fact that he has better relationships with Hezbollah and Iran now, mainly, and the fact that he has a basis in Lebanon, and for Hamas, the fact that he has another branch or another capabilities to stinge Israel, not only in the West Bank and in Gaza, which now he is restraining himself because of his own considerations, he can use the Lebanese arena when given the permission or not being stopped by Hezbollah to take advantage of this cooperation and use it as another front to bother Israel.
But taking to the basis, Hamas was against Iran because Sunnis and Shiite, Sheikh Yassin, the founder of Hamas, didn't want to take a dime from the Iranians. What happened that they became the puppy of Iran?
Time changes. Hamas has become not only a terrorist organization, but a political entity which controls the territory. This is why he's performing irregular behavior and restraining himself and not shooting every time. It's not the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And he has his own calculations. Now, by the way, Iran is now being received as part and parcel of the Arab world more and more. Basically, they are enemies. The Arabs against the Persians, the Palestinian organization vis-a-vis Iran, but Hamas has his own considerations and is strengthening the relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon, definitely. He's ready to get financial assistance from Iran because he needs it, or political support. So for Hamas, it's an opportunity. And regardless the Shiite-Sunnite rivalry.
So let's speak about abilities and personalities. Mm-hmm. What does Hamas want to achieve in Lebanon? Building an army, building an ability, building a force. What exactly?
I think building an ability. I don't think that Hamas is going to divest its resources to Lebanon as a main arena of operation.
Although it has resources within the refugee camps in Lebanon.
The refugee camps is something very, very murky and very complicated. The Fatah, the old Fatah, the veterans are still a serious force there, not Hamas, not Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So I don't think that they believe that they can control Lebanon. I don't think that they want to control the camps in Lebanon. I don't think that they have the ability. There are also elements of Daesh which are looking at Hamas as kafirs, as apostates. So it's not for Hamas. I think if Hamas is realistic, he doesn't look at Lebanon as a central arena for him. But it's an additional arena, and he can use it not as the main force, but as an additional force.
And the person who's in charge of that, Salah Harouri, is quite a unique personality who gives a big headache to the leaders of Hamas in Gaza as well.
Yes, no, look, when you look, we talked about serious personas in the rivalry camp, right? Salah Harouri, whom I met in person, is a serious person. He is a combination of a fighter, a warrior, and a thinker, a strategic thinker. And he has been like this since he started. He was a commander in the initial stages of Hamas cells in the West Bank, and he developed in the Israeli jails his strategy, and he looks at the scene and the combat with Israel as more sophisticated than just sending troops and sending warriors or sending terrorists and doing terror operations. So for him, when he got out of prison, he was kicked out to Syria, then he started moving around, and finally, after being in Turkey and Qatar, and he has stepped up in the ladders of the hierarchy of Hamas, and now he is a very significant player on the operational level, but on the strategic thinking of Hamas, and he is the one that not only supervising the development of the infrastructure in Lebanon and using it as part of its strategy, but also he is looking at other arenas like Turkey, as we know in the past, that is sending operators to operate in Israel. And not only that, but I think Harouri is responsible for strengthening the relationship with Hezbollah and Iran, because he understands the significance of this additional power to the Hamas handling of Hamas interests.
You've met him, and you've researched and read and written about him quite a lot during the years. What is his goal? What is he trying to achieve?
I think he wants, first of all, as we know, to give the Hamas the leadership of the Palestinian camp. That's not only his idea, but he is pushing towards it.
Taking over the PA.
Taking over the PA, on the way to implementing as possible, because he's not a dreamer, as possible, the fight vis-a-vis Israel. I'm not sure that he is convinced that in the short term he can take over Israel, but for the long term, he is looking at it prudently, wisely, strategically, and is pushing it through terrorism and through political maneuvers.
Which is very much like Hassan Nasrallah is thinking.
In a sense, yes, but I want also to mention that within Hamas leadership, Harouri is representing the West Bank. There is a very inherent struggle which is being pushed aside, but it's always underneath this power struggle between the West Bank vis-a-vis the Gazans. Now, the Gaza people, even on the nominal leadership, Gaza is leading the Hamas. Hania is the replacer of
Sinwar, Mohammed Def.
And Sinwar and Mohammed Def, and he is playing a significant role within this triumvirate, if you wish, and others, and he is always maintaining in mind the West Bank interests, and this is his focus.
And there is another personality who comes from the West Bank and was a significant player for years, which is Khaled Mashal, which is currently non-existent.
It was, I think his time has passed, not that he is totally out of the game, but I think the leadership shift was completed. Gaza is leading this camp. He will get his honorary role, but he is not the one who is calling the shots.
So going back to Salah Harouri, he lives currently in Lebanon because the force is there, because he's afraid to get killed by Israel in other arenas, because that's the easiest place to speak with Nasrallah and the Iranians.
He capitulated to the reality that was pushing him out of Turkey, out of Qatar, Syria. At the worst time that they had, maybe he will exile to Syria in some time, or if there are necessity to do it. But Lebanon for him is a very central role, because this is where his partners, Iran and Hezbollah, are residing. It's because he needs to do it. He knows that he can shelter there relatively without taking the risk that he is going to be eliminated. But I think that he understands that he's in the top list of the Israelis.
And does he have any aspirations to be the leader of the Palestinians? He wants to take over Yahya Sinwar, he wants to take over Ismail Haniyeh or others?
For sure. He looks at himself as a leader. He doesn't look at Sinwar as
Senior to
him. But he is smart. He's not going to push it. He knows that there are other battles to fight, and he's not pushing it at this time. He's looking at the future. He's a strategist smarter than Sinwar.
As far as we know, the operations that he's leading, he's involved in what he decides about fighting, about shooting. He recruits the people. How that mechanism works, because it's a complicated mechanism to recruit people, to arm them, to tell them what to do. Who's paying for that? How does it work?
First of all, he is a leader. He is not an operator. He doesn't operate cells in the West Bank himself. He has people, by the way, some of them I also met, Zaire Jaberin, who is his deputy, and others from the veterans of the West Bank and Gaza. He has Ranimat and others from the Surif cell, whom also I saw in the vicinity when I walked around there. He has people who are doing the operation for him. He is the strategist. He doesn't get into details. Maybe in some special operations he's getting involved, but he's a strategist.
But he gives approval if they want to shoot at Israel, like they did in March, dozens of rockets. He's involved, he's not involved.
Again, when you are talking in Lebanon, he can be more involved definitely in the consultation and the strategic planning beforehand. On the local level that somebody is shooting, I don't think they get approval from Harouri.
So let's speak about the strategic level. How close such a person, who unlike Hezbollah, doesn't bear any responsibility for Lebanon, for the Lebanese people, for the Lebanese economy, he can come, create terror and go. How dangerous he is to Israel to, make things much more complicated in our anyway complicated neighborhood?
We should address him as a leader, as a planner. Who is involved, like we addressed basically Abu Jihad.
Who was killed by Israel in 1987 in Tunis.
I didn't want to be blatant, but I implied to it. But Abu Jihad was a strategist. Sometimes he was involved specifically in operations, as we know in the attacks against Israel from this West Wing branch of Fatah. I think the operational side definitely in the West Bank in the current few years is being more guided from the outside. Sometimes they supplied financial assistance, sometimes they supplied concrete instruction, but many times it's a general guidance.
And weaponry, which flows into Israel mainly from the Jordanian border.
That's right, but the leadership doesn't smuggle in by their own hands the shipments.
So if we want to sum it all, and I would have asked you, how closer are we to some kind of escalation where we started, but looking at the big picture with Hamas, with the PIJ, with the Hezbollah, with the whole arena, as the Iranians are trying to get us into uniting fronts and getting Israel into trouble, fighting all of them simultaneously. How closer are we to that, if at all, than we were a year or 5 years ago?
I think we are close. We have always been close. Now we are closer, because I think the perception of Israel of being weaker is encouraging our enemies to provoke it, and we know that it can lead to provocation. But one thing is sure, Israel is a major player, and the decisions of Israel are the most significant decisions how it's going to develop.
What you're saying, we're not passive, we're active in that game.
Not only that we are active in the game, we are the most significant part, and if we want to restrain ourselves and to do operations when it's needed or when it's necessary for strategic thinking, then we should do it, not to be hastening, not to be provoked to irrational operation, not to work out of revenge when the blood is hot, and we all have hot blood when we are being killed. Israel is a major player here, and we should be very smart, not only aggressive.
Yoram Schweitzer, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.